Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is episode 619 for the 16th of Av in a regular year. So we've been getting to this whole discussion surrounding the letters of God's speech and what that's all about and how that is responsible for, how God's speech is responsible for creating all of the worlds. And this is part of a larger discussion in which eventually we're going to come to understand how it is that staka is a way of making God's name and what that means. So we're really delving into God's name. That got us into a deeper discussion of God's name, namely the tetragrammaton, the Yud Ke Vav Ke, and how those letters, Yud and He and Vav and He, really create all of the worlds, and how this is sort of like the idea behind when we say that the first two letters of that name, the Yud and the He, we say that the Yud created creates the next world, creates Olam Haba, and the He creates our world, the world in which we live. And we started talking about how all of this, what's the difference between the Yud and the He, and how Yud is really this like seminal point. It even looks like this like really small letter, and that's because it corresponds to Chochmah, which is this more like seminal kind of spark. And that is what we can think about in terms of being the form of the letters. Like it's sort of like the inwardness of the letters, like what the letters are in their kind of like more essential form state. And the He is this more manifest expansiveness of the letters. The He is this is what we can think of more as like leading into the matter of the letters. We do have the higher He, and then we have the lower He. So the higher He is still within like sort of the not totally actualized form matter state just yet, but it is leading towards that because we can think of it as like bina, and it's where the chokhmah of the yud starts to expand into dimensionality, into different ways and analysis and conception and stuff like that. And that's why when we look at the He, it actually has this more expansive state, and how that is the conduit, the channel through which we can get to that final He, which that final He is what we know of corresponds to Malchus, which is speech. And that is the speech which creates our world. So this is what we're going to be talking about today, is our world, our lowly world, and how it differs from the higher world. So we're going to begin this discussion today actually by addressing a question that comes up about all of this. Because if we're saying that our world is created through the letter He, and that He is synonymous with speech, if we're talking about the lower He, which comes from the higher He, which comes from Bina, we also know that everything, all of creation, actually comes through God's speech, comes through that He. So if that's true, then how can we say that it's specifically our world that was created through the letter He? We know that there are a lot of other worlds, as we'll go into today a little bit, that exist above our world, kind of above, not necessarily distance-wise above, but kind of like conceptually above our world, that are much higher, much loftier than our world. And those two were created by God. And if we know that all of creation happens through God's speech, thus through the letter He, then, seemingly those worlds are also created through the letter He. So what is it about our world in particular that we say that it was created through the letter He? So we're going to be talking about all of this today, and it's really going to give us a deeper appreciation of our world and what our world is. So with all of that being said, I think now is a good time to get right into the text. And for context, we're starting a new paragraph today as part of Iggeres HaKodesh, Epistle 5, which we've been studying for the past couple of days. So here we go. And so the Alter Rebbe begins, and he says, we're going to elaborate now about this teaching of our sages that this world, that our world was specifically created through the letter He. Like, what do we mean by this? So it's known to all who are wise of heart, says the Alter Rebbe, that all of the multiplicity of all the worlds and all of the chambers, all the Hechalos, that they are innumerable in nature. There's too many, it's uncountable, as it says. So this is from Eov chapter 26, verse 3. It says, Hayesh mispar ligdudav. Do his regiments have a number? Like, it's beyond measure. There's so many different like worlds and chambers and everything like that. And not only that, in each chamber and in each regiment, there's actually thousands of thousands and myriads upon myriads that serve God. So this is something that it's a citation from Daniel chapter 7 verse 10, and this is just a known idea that there's just, not only are there myriads upon myriads of worlds and chambers within each one of those worlds, there's myriads upon myriads of them. So it's like it's beyond number, and not only that. When we talk about the different levels of the soul, the nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, and yichida, there are 5 basic levels of the soul, but it's a lot more complicated than that, because there's actually an infinite number of levels and subcategories within each one of these levels. And so too, when we talk about worlds, there's like an infinite number of worlds, and so too chambers, and from this multiplicity of chambers that are found in Atzilus, Bria, and Yetzirah, like these are the 3 higher worlds, general worlds. So it's not just like, it sounds simple at first glance, right? There's Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah. Those are the 3 supernal worlds. And then you have our world of Asiya. It's a lot more complicated than that, because there are so many subdivisions within each one of these worlds. And it's really to infinity. That's like, when we get into each one of the aspects of these infinite aspects of these worlds, there's infinite numbers within that. So it's like we think about all this, like the Alter Rebbe is really trying to illustrate to us just how vast God's creation is. That this is, when we think about creation, we think about the creation of the worlds, like our world, planet Earth, like our specific world that we live in. But God's creation is way more than that, like way, way more than that. That's really what the Alter Rebbe is trying to illustrate to us here. And what he wants to remind us of is that all of this infinitude of creation, all of these like amazing worlds and chambers and souls and realms and all of that stuff, they all come from the same place. What do they come from? They come from the various combinations of the 22 letters of the speech of God, of the word of God. That then these 22 combinations then become more combinations to an infinite degree. So it's like it's all based on these 22 letters that get combined and permutated in all different ways to create everything, to create all of these realms. As it's described in Sefer Yetzirah, that 7 stones build 5,040 houses, meaning to say, it's like sort of a poetic way of describing how this process works. That you have 7 stones, so to speak, which is like 7 letters, for example, and those 7 letters can create 5,040 houses. What that means, this is a little bit of math for you guys, very interesting, is that there's this idea of like a factorial in math. So what is a factorial? A factorial can tell you the number of combinations and permutations that are possible given a certain subset. So let's make this really simple. So like, for example, the factorial of 1 is 1. Why? Because like, let's say if you have 1 ball and it's a red ball, how many ways can you arrange that ball? You can only arrange it in one way because there's only 1 ball. Now, what if you have a red ball and a yellow ball? So now you have a set of 2. So the factorial of 2, what's that going to be? That's going to be 2. Why? Because you can arrange the ball so that there's the red one and then the yellow one follows it. That's one combination. And then you can have another one where you have the yellow one and then you have the red one after that. So that's the second combination. Now, so that sounds boring kind of so far, not so interesting. But then let's say if you have 3, if you have a factorial of 3, this gets a lot more interesting because now we actually have a few different options. And so you can have, like, let's say there's a blue ball. So you have a red ball, a yellow ball, and a blue ball. How many ways can you arrange those together so that they are in a set together? And so what it so you can do, right, like blue, red, yellow. You can do blue, yellow, red. You can do yellow, blue, red, yellow, red, blue, all, different options. It comes out to 6. There's 6 different possibilities. And what's interesting is like it increases exponentially each time you add another level. So it's like the factorial of 3 is 6, but then the factorial of 4 is 24. The factorial of 5 is 120. So it keeps increasing in number. And when we get to 7, the factorial of 7, it jumps way up there to 5,040. So we see that this really increases to a very, very high degree. And if you start getting, so in the Sefer Yetzirah, now we can understand what it's talking about when it says these 7 stones that create 5,040 houses, that there are 5,040 different ways to combine these 7 letters, which really gives us a sense of just how magnificent, when we're talking about these permutations and combinations of the letters, how great it could be. And it goes onwards and onwards from there. So like the factorial of 8, for example, I'm going to look that up while I'm on here with you, is then it jumps up to 40,320. And so each time we add a number, it just goes onwards and onwards. So imagine if we're working with 22 letters, it gets really, really high up there. Like it's like, and this is, it's beyond the scope of what you can imagine. And so it's really, once we start getting to these really high letters, it's not something that we can even express. The mouth isn't able to, this is something the mouth cannot express in words, is the language that's used to describe this. And so, even though, says the Alter Rebbe, that it's true that amongst all of the different angels, and the different souls, there's many different levels, there's many different rungs, and to an infinite degree, higher and higher than each other. They all come from the same place. They all ultimately come from these permutations and combinations and substitutions, which also adds more possibilities. And Atbash is a certain system of substitution with the letters. And all of this is explained in Shar Yechud V'Emunah, the second section of the Tanya, in chapter 12. We talked about this more there. You can go back and look that up if you'd like. So all of these things come from the same place, even though there's different levels. They all ultimately stem from the 22 letters of God. So we're left with that question, and we're ending the near of this section. So what is the answer to the question? The question is, first of all, what is the question? The question is, if everything comes from these 22 letters, what makes our worlds different than all these other worlds? So for now, we're focusing on all these other worlds. And one thing we can say about all of these other worlds is that in a general sense, yes, they all come from these 22 letters. But one thing that they all have in common is that they all possess a certain chokhmah and knowledge. They a certain wisdom and understanding, and they know their creator. They all have an awareness of God, which is something we lack in our world. It's like here we can believe in God, we can try to connect to God, but the awareness of God, like in a tangible way, the way that we look around and we see the sky, the sun, all those things, any world that's higher than our world, they actually experience this in an experiential way, because their life force comes from the inwardness of the letters, the form of the letters, which, if you remember what we talked about, where does this come from? This comes from the supernal chokhmah, as is explained above. So we're starting to get at the hint of the explanation for this, is that all of these worlds that are above our worlds, yes, they come from the letters. They truly do come from the letters, just like we come from the letters, but their source in the letters, the way they come from the letters, is from the inner form of the letters, from the chokhmah of the letters. However, says the Alter Rebbe, this lowly world and the life force that's within it is too small, it's too dense to be able to handle the light and the life force in a way of the form of the letters and their inwardness, to be able to shine and to influence upon them without any kind of garment and concealment. The way that it radiates to the neshamos, to the souls, and to the angels. And so instead, this radiance and this influence comes about into this world in a way of matter and in a way of the body of the letters and in their external forms, which is breath. This is the actual breath. So this is what I mentioned in the introduction. The body and the form of the letters is the actual breath. It's the actual manifest way that the these letters get articulated. And these breaths are divided up into 7 different types of breath that are spoken about in Koheles. So Koheles talks about these 7 different types of breaths. And it talks about how these are the 7 breaths upon which the world stands. And this is explained further in the Zohar HaKodesh. And this is the Motzat Pi Hashem. This is the utterance that comes out from the mouth of God that is vested within this world and within all of its hosts in order to vivify it. And within it is vested the form of the letters. So the form of the letters is still here. So meaning to say the form of the letters, specifically of speech and of thought, which we talked about what that means, which stem from God's holy attributes and ultimately from his ratzon, from his will and from his chokhmah, etc., which are totally unified with the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, with the Infinite One, blessed be He, with utmost unity. So the form of the letters, that like deeper inwardness, is still here. It's just that the way that it's manifest is in a way of externality. It's in a way of the manifest breath of God's exhale, so to speak, right? And so now the Alter Rebbe says that this is how we can come to understand a teaching of the Arizal of blessed memory, that the aspect of the externalities of the vessels of Malchus of Atzilus, which is hinted at in the Hay of the name of Havaya, of the lower Hay specifically, of the name of Havaya, the Tetragrammaton, blessed be He, they descended down, these external aspects of the vessels of Malchus of Atzilus, descended down and became the soul for the world of Asiya. So let's just kind of visualize that for a second. So you have the Tetragrammaton, the Yud K Vav K, the Yud, the Hey, and the Vav and the Hey. The last Hey hints, it's an allusion to the aspect of the external vessels of Malchus of Atzilus. We spoke a little bit more about what that means in depth in other places, but it's basically the external vessels of the lowest part of the highest world. And these external vessels of the lowest part of the highest world descended down and became the soul of the lowest world, of our world, the world of Asiya. And now the Alter Rebbe concludes, just to kind of like bring this point home, that this is why it says in the Tikkunei Zohar that the Yud is in Atzilus, meaning the Yud of the Yud K Vav K is in Atzilus. And then it goes through each one of the letters that then the Hey is in the world of Bria, then the Vav of the Tetragrammaton is in the world of Yetzirah, and then the lower Hey nests in the world of Asiya, of our world. So that's the end of the section today. So really just to conclude, the main point that the Alter Rebbe is bringing out here is this idea that our world does contain within it the form of the letters. It is created through the form of the letters ultimately, but the way that it's manifest is through the external aspect of letters, which is the breath of God, the exhale that you can think of God. And it's and that's because of that's all that we're able to be able to handle in our world due to the loneliness and the coarseness of our world. So that's the main point. And that's it for today. So we'll continue tomorrow when we begin a new paragraph in this same epistle, Epistle 5 of Iggeres HaKodesh. I'll speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.